Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another YouTube video. My name is Pollux the Wise, and I hope you guys are doing absolutely frogging splendid, taking care of yourselves, and as always, staying safe. Today's episode is going to be a tier list video, since it's been a while since I last triggered the Kingdom Rush community with my hot takes on the franchise. But in today's episode, we're going to be doing a tier list on Legends of Kingdom Rush, specifically enemies. Now, I wanted to originally do this on Heroes, but oh well, that was not going to work out because we didn't have all of the required images that we needed. We only have the ones for enemies. So without further ado, ladies and gents, let's go ahead and get started. So the first enemy on today's list is going to be the Goblin from the Crumpthax Dominion campaign. Basically, this guy has low to mediocre damage on the high end, and he does have good movement, and that's kind of what does make him somewhat of a threat when it comes to doing flawless runs, especially when your accompanying heroes and companions and your legend don't have any armor. These guys can be very annoying to deal with in swarms. But that being said, most of the time in vanilla gameplay, they are literally never a problem. So with that being said, I think we're just going to grant this guy a simple, humble C tier. With our next contestant, however, we're going to up the ante a little bit. So we've got the Orc. Now, the regular Orc does have armor, but unlike the Orc Champion, his cousin, he does not have the ability to regenerate said armor. So once he loses that armor, it stays gone forever. But that being said, he doesn't have as much HP or damage as the Orc Champion does. It's still pretty mediocre. In vanilla gameplay, these guys are not really still that very much annoying. English for a moment. But in all seriousness, they can definitely be a nuisance in challenges. So with that being said, I think we're going to go ahead and drop the Orc into B tier. Because unfortunately, he just does not have that much range. Next up, we have the Orc Archer. Now, the Orc Archer is just straight up, both in vanilla gameplay and in challenges, probably one of the most annoying enemies in the game. It's got 2 range, but it also has 4 movement on top of that. Basically, this thing is like a walking freaking sniper, and it's ridiculous how OP it is. Not on top of that, it has 2 armor and freaking like the damage isn't that great, to be honest, but when your companions don't have that much armor to tank, or you're rolling RNG for like one of your units, such as like a Dark Knight, companion to try and tank multiple hits from Orc Archers, that just gets to be so messy so quick. But that being said, in vanilla gameplay, they're not that difficult to kill. But when it comes to challenges, they're definitely a problem. I don't think that this is the most difficult enemy in the game, but it is definitely one of the tougher ones for sure. I think this is going to be our first S tier enemy on the list. And moving on from that, we are also going to tackle the Orc Shamans. These guys have 2 range, 3 movement. They don't deal a lot of damage, but they do deal magic damage. And they also have the ability to heal allied units, much like the original edition of the Shaman from the original edition of Kingdom Rush. So these guys are very, very annoying to deal with for sure. Honestly, you could say that they're on par with the Orc Archers. They don't, again, have as much range, or I shouldn't say that. They have the same range, they just don't have the same, I meant movement. They have the same movement. I apologize. I can't English yet today because I haven't had my Mountain Dew. Probably should have done that beforehand. But in any case, they have the same movement. They do not have the same range. It's actually shorter. So are they as cancerous as Orc Archers in that regard? No, but overall, I'd still say they are on par with the Orc Archers, both in terms of vanilla gameplay and in terms of challenges, in terms of difficulty. So we're going to go ahead and grant them S rank as well. Next up, we have the Orc Champion. Again, just a much more beefy version of the Orc himself, except you can rely on him to consistently deal high damage to both your legends and your companions. They can basically one-shot them if you're not careful. They also have 2 movement, just like the regular Orcs do, but just, again, insanely high damage. Their special attack is insane. It can deal, I think on the high end, it's like 9 damage, which is just absolutely nuts. But that being said, how much more difficult are they to take down than the regular Orcs? I would say pretty substantially difficult. When you add into effect the Orc Shaman healing it and keeping it buffed, and the fact that these guys can regen armor automatically just makes this a such better version of the Orc. But again, it only has 2 movement, so it does give you quite a bit of time to burst it down with your companions, and if you use the right heroes to kind of stack damage on top of each other from other companions and heroes, such as, like, say, with the Sorceress, these guys can prove to be a little bit easier than these enemies back here on the S rank. to take care of and deal with. So that being said, I think that's where we're going to go ahead. We're going to put the Orc Champion in A tier. Next up, we have the Ogre. Now, the Ogre is your typical slow-moving enemy, deals consistently high damage, just like the Orc Champion. This guy is basically like the Orc Champion on steroids when it comes to HP, not so much on armor. He has no armor, but that doesn't really matter because he also has a splash attack. And the splash damage is pretty considerable, too. It's, I think, like 3 every single time. Somebody correct me in the comment section if I'm wrong. But the Ogre, yeah, definitely a menace. He has a lot of health, and I don't know. Honestly, he's like a slightly less weak version of the Orc Champion, just because he doesn't have any armor, and he doesn't regen any HP or armor, obviously. I think we're going to go ahead and grant him the same tier as the Orc Champion, though, in terms of difficulty, because in vanilla gameplay, these guys really are not that much of a problem. In challenges, though, definitely a problem with the right supporting units. So moving on from there, we're done with Krumthak's Dominion at this point. Also note that I'm not including any bosses because they just automatically go into S+ tier. Same thing with any enemies that are either from the environment or that get summoned from like other units such as like say the ground, like the tentacles from the Exultant or the Obelisk. We're not counting any of those. We're not counting any of the special arena enemies that are elite units such as the Troll Zerker, etc. Those would automatically be going into S+ as well. So we're just looking at enemies from the main campaigns, or each of the main campaigns in Legends of Kingdom Rush. So with that being said, moving on, we're going to take a look at the next enemy on today's list, which is the basic Troll. These guys have 3 movement, decent damage, and they have the ability to regen their HP. And they already have a decent amount of HP as it is. These guys are solid. Just all around solid, annoying, both in vanilla gameplay and challenges. Are they impossible to take down? No, but they are definitely on par with the Troll Champions. Or not Troll Champions, but the Orc Champions. Because they also have the ability to get enraged, which also buffs their HP regen and their damage, which is just nuts. And that affects all other nearby trolls that they're adjacent to as well. So honestly, you could make a case that they're even stronger than the Orc Champions. But these guys, straight up, are just solidly annoying. So that is where we're going to put them. We're going to put them in A tier. Because they're not impossible to take down. They don't have any armor. They just regen HP. But still, they are definitely a nuisance. Next up, we're going to take a look at the Winter Wolf. Now, the Winter Wolf... You know what? I just realized I also went out of order for a moment. It's okay. We can salvage this. And yeah, I'm looking for the wolf. The wolf. The basic regular wolf. These guys, again, much like goblins, they have good movement, low damage, but what makes them a little bit more annoying than the goblins is the fact that they have the dodge chance abilities, so they can dodge your melee attacks. Not so much at range, but these guys, pretty weak overall, both in vanilla and, challenges. The only thing that gives them a slight advantage over goblins is the dodge chance, but I don't think it's enough to put them into B tier. I'd still say that these guys are just at a solid C tier overall. Next up, we've got the Warg. Now, the Wargs, on the other hand, they're much more threatening. Still just a lot of HP. They don't have any regen. They can still dodge melee attacks that target them, at least, single target melee attacks. They have a bleed attack, which can be somewhat of a nuisance, meaning your units have to waste a turn just basically doing nothing, which gives enemies a lot of time actually to catch up. So I would argue that these guys are B tier, because in vanilla gameplay, these guys are not that much of a problem whatsoever. They really are just not that threatening to me personally. And frankly, in challenges, they can be somewhat of a problem depending on what party you pick. But if you have somebody such as like the Dark Knight or the regular Knight who can block those kinds of hits, they're pretty easy to deal with. Also, we forgot the Knight, which can occur in a special node encounter where you basically fight them if they try to check you for potions for their war efforts, and you refuse. All things considered, Dark Knights, they don't have that much HP, so if you bring somebody with magic in vanilla gameplay, these guys are really not that threatening. If you bring somebody who deals physical damage, though, obviously these guys have a lot of armor, and they can regen it if I remember correctly. Somebody let me know in the comment section if I'm wrong. But all things considered, they're solid. I would say they're probably on par. They're like somewhere between A and B tier. It's hard to tell. I think the low HP is the biggest deciding factor, because anytime you bring a party with magic damage, they're just straight up going to get almost one shot almost every time. So I think we're going to go ahead and put these guys into B tier. Next up, we've got ourselves the Winter Wolf. So the Winter Wolf, much like the regular wolf, also has the ability to dodge attacks, melee attacks. Has good movement. Not as much movement as the regular wolves, though. I think it's just 3 instead of 4 hexes. But what makes these guys very annoying to deal with, both in vanilla gameplay and in challenges, is the fact that they can freeze your units with a special attack. And that really sucks, okay? That really sucks, because it deal true damage when they use this ability. It's very annoying to wait, a turn for your enemies to get unfrozen, or if you're just trying to do a flawless run, you basically have to prioritize sniping these guys right away, because they will use the ability 100% of the time that they have it available. It's insane. So, with that being said, again, they're still pretty low on HP, though, and they don't have any abilities to, regen it like the trolls do, so I think we're going to go ahead and grant these guys B tier. Next up, we've got ourselves the Yeti. Now, the Yeti, on the other hand, is a lot more threatening. He doesn't have any HP regen or armor like, the trolls or troll champions or troll breakers, etc. But what he does have is good damage, a lot of health, and he also has a ranged attack, which can root your units in place. He's basically a buffed version of the Ogre. Is he stronger than the Ogre long enough to, or more enough to get himself into S tier? Not necessarily. These guys are still pretty decently easy to take down when it comes to vanilla gameplay. In challenges, on the other hand, they can be somewhat of a problem depending on what party you pick, but they also have a limit as far as how much range they have. I forget what the range is specifically, though. It might be 3 tiles. Somebody, again, let me know in the comment section if I'm wrong. Probably should have done my homework a little bit more before I made this tier list, but it's okay. So with that being said, moving on to Troll Champions. These guys are very annoying, both in vanilla gameplay and in terms of just challenges. They can regen much like any other troll unit. They can get the Berserk troll state if a nearby adjacent troll dies. They also have a very strong melee attack, and their ranged attacks are their only weakness because it's a full action. They can't move and use that at the same time. So it's actually very easy to kite these guys around and then just gradually wear them down with ranged units. But if you're using melee units, it's very difficult to tank multiple melee attacks, let alone ranged attacks. So these guys can sometimes prove to be an issue. It really just depends on what your party is. Overall, I'd say that they're solid, and I think we're going to go ahead and put them into A tier, just simply because of the fact that you can kite them around fairly easily. As long as you stay out of the way of their melee attacks, these guys are really not that much of a problem. So, next up on the list is the Troll Breaker. Armor, which I'm pretty sure he can regen, HP, which he can regen, and the Battering Ram attack, which has insane range and damage. These guys are a nuisance, just straight up. Unless you have a strong melee unit to tank at the very front where the Troll Breaker is about to charge with his Battering Ram, or just, straight up hit with his regular melee attack. This guy is just a freaking huge nuisance, especially in challenge runs. In vanilla gameplay, not as bad because obviously you can use abilities and you don't need to worry about, other stuff like that. But yeah, this guy straight up is an S tier unit. He's disgustingly overpowered. Speaking of another disgustingly overpowered unit, we're going to take a look at the Troll Chieftain. So regen, and unlike other trolls, when he gets to low enough HP, he does not retreat. He will keep attacking your units, which honestly makes him even more scary and threatening, which is kind of insane. The biggest problem that I have with the Troll Chieftain isn't even the fact that he can buff all nearby trolls. It's the ice, ability that he has, where he basically makes it rain ice piles or ice spikes that deal true damage and also freeze your units in place. This is just disgustingly overpowered. And honestly, I think with his HP, his damage, and his abilities, he is going to be our first S+ enemy. This guy just all around was such a pain in my butt whenever I did challenges in Legends of Kingdom Rush, and he's still being a pain in my butt when I did the Primal and Nightmare difficulty challenges in Legends of Kingdom Rush. He's just absolutely horrifying to face in any encounter. So he's going to earn himself the S+ tier. Next up, we've got some spooters to worry about. Some spooters. So the baby spiders. These things have 3 movement, and they have a melee poison attack. Oh my god. They're very annoying to deal with. That being said, they don't have a lot of HP, and they don't regen. They have no armor. So, all things considered, they're not that difficult to kill, but they are very deadly if they manage to get in range of your units in melee combat. So it's basically a necessity to have, units that can, attack at range. If you don't, you're kind of screwing yourself over whenever you get to a spider encounter. And honestly, I dread these things so much, I will go to great lengths just to avoid spider encounters. They're that much of a threat. That being said, like I just said, they're not that difficult to take down, but they're still very strong. So I think they're earning themselves A tier. Next up, we are going to take a look at the Web Reaver or Web Spitter, or whatever you want to call this thing. But it's basically an enemy spider that I believe has an ability that's not a full action. It basically has a ranged attack that not only poisons your unit, but also stuns. It basically, or not, I shouldn't say stuns. It roots them in place. So much like the Yetis ranged attack, it's basically like a buffed version of that. It not only roots them in place, but it also deals poison damage. And this thing has pretty good movement and range as well on top of all of that. I would say it's an S tier enemy for sure, because it also has a lot of health. Again, in vanilla gameplay, these guys are actually kind of a little annoying to take down, and in challenges especially, these things are just straight up the worst. Speaking of another enemy that's on par with them, we have the giant spiders. I don't understand why these things aren't called matriarchs, because in comparison to the regular matriarchs, I mean, they look so similar. It's just one looks slightly different colored and slightly bigger, but whatever. Anyways, so here we go. We have the giant spider, which for some reason has a ranged attack when the original version of this thing in the original edition of Kingdom Rush did not. Also very disgusting to deal with, and it has good range of movement. The damage, again, isn't very high, but it's a poisoned attack that can just straight up penetrate through armor, making ranged units on your party a necessity. In vanilla gameplay, they're annoying to deal with. In challenges, they're very annoying to deal with. Honestly, these guys are basically on par with each other. So we're going to put this in S tier. Spider Matriarch has an ability to launch eggs and summon new Spiderlings, which honestly, nobody likes these to begin with, but an enemy that can summon them, that's just even worse. So honestly, this thing has a lot of health. It's very annoying. Again, both in vanilla gameplay and just other, challenges. The problem is there's a fine line between S plus and S. It's difficult to say whether or not this thing deserves S plus. I'm going to put it at S tier, but if you guys want to argue with me in the comments about why you think it deserves S plus, I mean, we're going to put this in S tier. That's where I think this goes. Not S plus, I apologize. But if you guys think it deserves S plus, let me know in the comment section below why. Frankly, I don't find it that difficult to beat. It's annoying, yes, but I don't think it deserves S plus like the Troll Chieftain does. Next up on the list, oh boy, we have the Demon Spawn. These guys have 3 movement. They have high damage. They're not that difficult to kill because they don't have a lot of HP or armor. But if you get them down to 1 HP, they can just sacrifice themselves and explode, damaging your units, which is obviously no bueno. Very difficult to deal with this unit. But like the Spiderlings, I would say they're basically on par with them. So I'm going to put them in A tier. Next up, we have Demon Hounds, which, by the way, does not have armor. This is just a screenshot that I got from the wiki, so some of these stats, as far as like armor is concerned, is not necessarily accurate. The Demon Lord, I'm pretty sure, also does not have this much armor. It should be like half of that, honestly. Anyways, Demon Hounds, very annoying to deal with. They have good movement, they have good damage. Their basic attacks, I'm pretty sure, will set units on fire, so they just straight up ignore and bypass armor. The dodge chance, like every other wolf ability or hound ability has. These things are disgustingly OP. I hate them. They are just the worst. That being said, when they don't have their armor, they are pretty squishy. 8 HP, it is a lot, but it honestly, at the same time, it's not. It's difficult to describe. They're basically like trolls who can't regen their HP, but like have much stronger attacks. And also have a dodge chance, which honestly might be enough to just bump them into S tier. So I think that's where we're going to put them. Demon Flareons. Do I even need to explain why these guys are straight up going into S+? I mean, this is just ridiculous. You basically gave a true ranged attack unit absurd range, absurd movement, and yeah, I mean, bypasses armor with its basic attacks. That's just disgusting. I have no idea who made this enemy at Ironhide, But yeah, we hate it. I hate it. We all hate it. I'm pretty sure. Both in vanilla gameplay and in challenges, this thing is the worst. Re the demon people, and yeah, ooga booga. Demon lords. Yeah, you're honestly not that far behind them. Honestly, the fact that this thing has a ranged attack and it can summon melee units if it doesn't have its ranged attack, this thing is straight up just going to S plus for me. I hate this freaking thing. Demon lords are like one of the worst enemies for me to encounter because the freaking basic attacks, man, they just they couldn't throw fireballs in the original edition of Kingdom Rush, so why are they able to now? Okay, that's just it doesn't make sense to me. But whatever, it's fine. Ironhide's prerogative to develop the enemies how they want to. Give them good character arc development, bro moment. Next up, we've got the basic skeletons. Honestly, these guys in vanilla gameplay are much like the winter wolves or the regular wolves. They have better damage than the wolf or the goblins. But that being said, the fact that they can reanimate themselves is a little bit annoying. Can definitely make some runs in the Extra Dimensional Menace campaign a little bit more difficult. I think we're going to go ahead and put these guys in B tier. Because honestly, on their own in vanilla gameplay, they're just not that much of an issue. And if you manage to kill all the enemies before they even have a chance to reanimate or revive, that's even better. But yeah, otherwise, there's just not that much of an issue. In challenges, though, they can be a little bit annoying, but not insane. Skeleton Knights. Now, these guys have less movement than the regular skeletons do, but they have a shield bashing ability that basically repeatedly stuns your units in place. That is insane. And while they don't have as much, movement or I'm not even sure damage for that matter as the, baby skeletons do, the fact that they have 3 armor on top of that just makes these guys annoying. And the same revival ability if you happen to wait too long to kill all the other enemies. I think these guys are going to go to A tier, honestly. Next up on the list, ladies and gents, we have ourselves the Acolytes, the Unblinded Acolyte. Again, kind of just akin to the skeletons. The only difference is when they die, they basically will summon a tentacle from the ground, and that thing can attack enemies or just pose a movement blockade to certain units, whether that's yours or the enemies. It doesn't matter. Honestly, I never really had much of a problem with these guys. In challenges, they can kind of be annoying just simply because of the fact that they have such high movement, and I'm pretty sure it's the same damage as the regular skeletons do. I think it's like 2 to 4 or something like that. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's 1 to 3. I think it's 1 to 3, actually. I apologize. But yeah, these guys normally never really been that much of an issue for me, both in vanilla gameplay and challenges, so we're going to put them in B tier. But at least they have an ability, unlike both of these guys. So, I mean, this guy does technically too with his passive trait to dodge attacks, but it's not the same. So, that being said, next up we have the Unblinded Priest. I hate these things. I really seriously do. 2 movement. I'm pretty sure it's 3 range. They deal magic attacks, which can bypass armor. And if they get down to 1 HP, they can turn into an Abomination. They're basically like a only slightly less weaker version of the Demon Flareon. I would say this is an S tier enemy for sure. For sure on par with the Orc Archer. The only reason I put it on par with the Orc Archer is because of the fact that it's relatively squishy. And it doesn't have any armor, unlike the Orc Archer. And it can't get a shield like the Demon Flareon, so there is that as well. Next up, speaking of Abominations, we have the Abomination on the list. Oh boy. Yeah, this guy's very tanky, just like the Trollbreaker. He can explode when he gets down to 1 HP, just like any other demon unit. It's kind of disgusting. It's got good damage, and yeah, slow movement speed though, but very good damage. So he's your typical beefy enemy. He's basically like a buffed version of the Ogre. I would say he's on par with the Trollbreaker, so let's go ahead and put him into S tier. The Exultant is just going straight into S+. I'm sorry. You gave this thing 2 movement, 4 range, ability to summon tentacles, and magic attacks. Like, bruh. This thing is like basically a priest on steroids. It's disgusting. I hate it. This is like one of the worst enemies in the game. I can't tell you guys how many times this has like ruined me in challenge runs. In vanilla gameplay, it's not that much of a problem because these things are squishy as hell and you can afford to take damage because you just don't give a shit. But this is just straight up cancer. I don't understand who made this. I freaking hate these enemies. These things suck. Anyways, moving on. we've got ourselves the Magma Elemental. So it's basically like an ogre, but with a ranged attack and a weird like shaped splash attack. It's weird how this thing works. It's not like all the other splash, you know, enemies such as the ogre, the troll breaker, the abomination. It attacks kind of like Sasquatch does, I think. But in any case, yeah, this thing is basically like an armored version of like an ogre, or it's more heavily armored is my point. Still the same slow movement, same good damage and everything, but just adding a ranged attack on top of that. It's not as much range as the Yetis, but it still is very lethal if left unattended or ignored. And I'm pretty sure it's a full action too, which does kind of make it slightly less uh, uh, effective than the Yeti's projectiles. But still, even with all of that, yeah, Magma Elementals in vanilla gameplay can be slightly annoying, but in challenges, they are very annoying. It makes ranged units a necessity. And don't even think about bringing melee units to the party, because they will still use their ranged magma attacks, and those can pierce armor. So that sucks. In any case, where are we going to rank this bad boy, you ask? I'm kind of torn between A and S tier, because he's basically a buffed version of the Yeti. I'm not sure if he's on par with the Trollbreaker or the Abomination, but I think this might be a controversial pick, but I think we're going to go ahead and put him in S tier. Next up, we have ourselves the Obelisk. Basically, it has the ability to heal other obelisks and other enemies, and it can summon tentacles once every 2 turns, 3 of them. Yeah, this thing, in vanilla gameplay, it's very annoying to deal with, and in challenges, it's just straight up cancerous. Honestly, I'm torn between S and A tier again, but I think this thing, because of the fact that it's stationary, and it does have a limit to its ridiculous scope of vision, which is 8 tiles, you can still kind of outrange them. It just depends if you're willing to push all of your units all the way to the back of the map, which is kind of depressing. But once you eliminate all the other enemies, these guys on their own are very easy to deal with, provided you can get past all of the little vines that they summon from the ground, all the little tentacles. So we're going to go ahead and put these guys in A tier, because they're not insanely difficult to deal with, but at least on their own. In any case, moving on to the final campaign, the Ashurvan campaign. So let's start off with the Sapling. The Sapling has 2 armor, 4 HP, good movement. It can root multiple units in place, making it easier for enemies to catch up to the rest of the party. Yeah, these things, and the fact that they can return as a trunk if you don't kill everybody else fast enough, they are just one of the most mildly annoying enemies in the series. Honestly, if it wasn't for that, I could handle these guys just fine. But I would say that they're definitely on par in terms of annoyingness when it comes to both vanilla and gameplay challenges. It's the baby spiders. So I'm going to put them in A tier. And the Vine Paws, basically it's a unarmored trunk, or baby trunk, but with a stronger melee attack if it has its charge or headbutt ability, depending on how many tiles it gets to walk. So the fact that this thing can basically gain damage the farther it travels, that's just insane. I would honestly argue that this is close to an S tier ability, but it's not quite. They are very squishy. Ranged units can deal with these guys pretty easily, and I would say that they deserve the same par as the Sapling in A tier. Next up, we have the Trunks. So Trunks can regen their HP if it gets down to 1, and they have armor and a good splash attack. It's usually very high damage, just like any other big beefy enemy. I would say that they're on par with the Abominations and the Magma Elementals and the Troll Breakers for sure. They have a lot of abilities, and the fact that they're immune to knockback just makes this even worse. So these guys suck. I hate them. Tree people, and Ooga Booga. You guys are going straight into S tier. Next up, we have the Nightshades. I mean, yeah, sure, let's just give a melee unit a poisonous attack, just like the spiders. Except on top of that, let's give them more HP and 3 armor, because why the hell not? These guys are basically like the buffed versions of Spiderlings, and they suck. They really, really suck. I hate these things. I hate them so freaking much. They're honestly an S tier enemy. Some would argue S+, but I honestly think because of the fact that they don't, I don't know. It's hard. You can make a case for S+, but I think that they're S tier simply because of the fact that, I don't know. They are to me. I've never struggled with them that much, at least in challenges. you can kite them in front of everybody else and then just snipe them at the front of a group. But all things considered, I would rather deal with Nightshades than like some of these S+ tier enemies for sure. Because at least with these guys, if you have ranged attackers, you know, it makes things easier. You could argue the same thing for all of these guys, but in all seriousness, I haven't had as much trouble with the Nightshades as I have with these enemies in S+ tier. On the other hand, though, oh god, the next two enemies are just going straight into S+. I'm sorry, whoever designed these two, you guys suck. Ashravan Warlocks are probably the most disgusting enemy in the game. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure this is the like worst of the worst in S+. And by worst of the worst, I mean like this is the most busted unit in the entirety of the game. Forget the Exultant for a minute. This guy has a chance to dodge melee attacks. He can summon a Vine Paw. And he can break your character's armor just straight up. Yeah, that doesn't seem completely busted or OP. And then the Enchantress, who's got magical attacks and also has a Spore attack that basically, if it deals HP damage, it'll drain the target's HP until it dies. Which is just a straight up bra moment. Until you kill the Enchantress. If you manage to kill it in time, that is. But with that, ladies and gents, in any case, I hope you guys enjoyed this tier list. Let me know down in the comment section below if you guys agree or disagree with any of this tier list. Just keep in mind this is all my opinion. None of it should be treated as objective or factual. So yeah, feel free to argue away in the comments. It'll be interesting to see what your guys' perspective is on this. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the YouTube video. And I will hopefully see you guys all in the next one. This is Pollux the Wise. Peace out.